During the uprooting, with all men between 18 and 45 years of age sent to road building or POW camps, the women were left to deal with the consequences of the government's actions. Mothers became the sole heads of households, raising children, managing bills, and trying to make ends meet on little or no income. The stress and uncertainty were unimaginable, and yet many of the women refused to be silent. Among those who refused to be silent was Muriel Kitagawa. Canadian-born, writing in the New Canadian on January 9, 1942, 6 weeks before the uprooting began, she defiantly bore witness.
The tide of panic starting from irresponsible agitators threatens to engulf the good sense of the people of British Columbia. The daily press is flooded with letters to the editor demanding the indiscriminate internment of all people of Japanese blood, alien or Canadian-born, demanding the immediate confiscation of our right to work as we like, our right to live like decent human beings. This is our only home, where by the sweat of our endeavors we have carved a bit of security for ourselves and our children. Would we sabotage our own home? They think we are cattle to be herded wherever it pleases our ill-wishers. They do not consider us as people, but as a nuisance to be rid of at the first opportunity. We have often been accused of taking the bread out of white folks' mouths. Does not one have the right to enjoy what one has earned? Our few trades and professions, what golden loot for our would-be despoilers! No wonder they drool to get at them. Can they not see that we love our home and would fight to protect it from the invader?
The only Japanese-Canadian teaching in British Columbia's public school system in 1942, Canadian-born Hide Hiyodo taught at Lord Byng Elementary School in Steveston for 16 years. In 1936, she was a member of a 4-person delegation to Ottawa lobbying for Japanese Canadians' right to vote. In a speech to the Special Committee on Elections and Franchise Acts, she said,
"I can with confidence say that Canadian-born Japanese are citizens of whom the people of this country need not at any time be ashamed. Deprived of their normal rights of citizenship, however, the young Canadians whom I teach will be frustrated in achieving those very ideals which I am paid to inculcate."
In 1942, when the provincial government refused to fund education for Japanese Canadian children, Hide, after teaching all day in Steveston, would travel to Hastings Park to teach, careful to return home before the 9 p.m. curfew. For the next 4 years, Hide supervised the education of the 3,000 children in the camps, developing an innovative program that recruited and trained 130 Japanese Canadian high school graduates and a few university students as teachers. Anne Sunahara writes that Hastings Park was hardest on the women. Screaming children, distraught adults, dysentery, nervous tension, prying eyes, and the stink of animals defined the women's existence. When one of the women complained to a nurse that there were live maggots under the floorboards, the nurse called them all filthy Japs. Fumi Shoyama, Tom's sister, and a nurse at Hastings Park, leapt to their defense and screamed,
"What do you think we are? Are we cattle? Are we pigs, you dirty so-and-so?"
One night at Hastings Park, women and children were anxiously milling about, and a Royal Canadian Mountie pulled out his nightstick and started hitting them, yelling, "Get the hell back." Diminutive Aiko Henmi, poet, New Canadian journalist, and UBC grad, strode up to the Mountie and shouted,
You put that stick down! What do you think you're doing? Do you think these women and children are so many cows that you can beat them back into their place?
Ken Adachi wrote that many of the Japanese Canadian men and women incarcerated at Hastings Park complained about the lack of adequate medical attention, quality of food, and lack of privacy. The kitchen staff went on strike several times due to overwork, and there was even a sit-in at the mess hall to protest the thin, starchy gruel served for breakfast. While their complaints and protests led to some improvements, the men and women remained dissatisfied. On June 10, 1942, they sent a petition to the International Red Cross demanding further action. A month later, in what seemed like a whitewash, an investigator from the Red Cross declared himself highly satisfied with the living conditions at Hastings Park. The Nisei Mass Evacuation Women's Group was formed to stand side by side with their menfolk in their demand that families not be separated. In a letter addressed to mothers and wives and sisters, they wrote, "We have seen our fathers, husbands, and brothers give up all material possessions, the efforts of a lifetime of sweat and self-denial. We have seen families upon families become separated, bringing grief and tragedies to innumerable homes, menfolk sent to road camps and internment, perhaps for many years of anxiety and physical and mental suffering. Aged men, women, and children have been sent to ghost towns, a dilapidated place of an uncertain future, a place unfit to bring up our children in its present condition. Let us stand united and show the world that we women also have the courage to fight for a righteous cause, and that we are willing to sacrifice whatever may be necessary for such cause." Kyoko Tanaka Goto's life was unconventional in every sense of the word. She was a picture bride who arrived in Canada in 1914 to marry a man she had never met. She was 19 years old. For 5 backbreaking years, Kyo and her husband worked 18-hour days as farm laborers until she earned enough money to leave her husband and start over in Vancouver. In 1928, she turned the upstairs of the Palace Hotel at 35 West Hastings Street into a brothel and had 12 prostitutes working for her. When the order came to be forcibly evacuated, Kyo refused and went into hiding in the hotel, assisted by a cozy relationship with city officials and the police. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police finally got their woman, although she was one of the last to leave Vancouver. She was jailed for 2.5 months in Ocala Prison before being sent to Greenwood. On the former grounds of the prison, a sign commemorates Kyo Goto's disobedience of discriminatory legislation. In a 1972 interview, a 76-year-old Kyo said that she was the first Japanese Canadian to return to Vancouver in 1946, undoubtedly by bribing someone. After a series of odd jobs in Chinatown, she returned to her beloved Powell Street to operate a gambling establishment. To quote Dr. Laura Ishiguro, while Kyo Tanaka's particular life and choices were unusual, her story also reminds us about a broader point, that Japanese Canadian women were creative agents carving out their own possibilities in their own lives. Another picture bride, Kinori Shinohara, did not want to get married, but accepted that was her destiny. Against her father's wishes, she became engaged to Sanzo Oka, a man in Canada she had never met, who was 14 years older than her. Years later, Kinori would recall their first meeting, saying that her husband looked very old, very different than the photos he had sent. In a haiku, she wrote, "I feel some sadness with the title wife by my name." Kinori gave birth to a son, Peter Ichiro, shortly before the family was sent to Hastings Park. The conditions were intolerable for the newborn, who became very ill. There were no doctors to check on the baby, and the mother was denied permission to attend a doctor's appointment outside the park. Finally, 2 months later, a doctor diagnosed the baby as being dangerously undernourished and requiring immediate hospitalization. Kinori's demands for an operation for her son were ignored by the administration, and she turned to the Nisei Mass Evacuation Group for help. Arguing that it was a civil rights issue, the group's demands for immediate medical attention for the baby were met. Sadly, the operation came too late, and the child suffered severe visual and intellectual impairment.